Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Bikes or Death podcast. As always, my name is Patrick, and I'm your host. And on today's episode, I've got a very special guest, actually, two special guests. Scarlet and Flint Ziegler made waves in the bikepacking world when they became a father and daughter duo to complete the 2,750-ish miles of the Great Divide mountain bike route. Now, many people have done this route, but what sets them apart is that Scarlet did it when she was only 13 years old. And as you'll hear on today's episode, bikepacking and bike touring and self-supported bike riding is not new to Scarlet. She started her journey at 2 years old when she was towed along with her family on bike tours. And from there, it was just a progression that continued until today. I think you will find Scarlet to be an incredible young woman who has done some amazing things. And she's not one to brag or boast, and so I will do it for her. What she's doing is absolutely amazing. It's incredible. And I think what we learn on today's episode is that when we give our children an opportunity to experience the world in this manner, to be self-reliant, to grow without boundaries, well, there are no boundaries. I hope that you enjoy this one as much as I did. And before we get to today's episode, let's take a moment to thank the people that made it possible, starting with our latest batch of patrons. I'd like to give a warm welcome and a shout out to Mountain Bike Shenanigans. Oh, I'm going to get this one wrong. Ville Haataja from Finland. Hope I got that one even close to right. Also, Patty Short, Steve Lindemann, Steve Thompson, Keith Buchanan, and Gary Coors. We also had a couple patrons increase their pledge this month, so we'd like to thank Alfred Lau and Chris Hodgkins for increasing your pledge. We cannot produce these episodes without your support, so if you would like to help produce these episodes and show a little support to the Bikes for Death team, you can find out more over at patreon.com/bikes-or-death. Today, we have Katie Bryce, who is the CEO of Old Man Mountain Racks, to talk to us today. Welcome to the show, Katie.
Yeah, stoked to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm glad you could hop on a call. So Old Man Mountain makes bike racks that are traditionally thought of as used for bike touring. What would you say to that?
Yeah, so Old Man Mountain started in 1996 when we wanted to put racks on bikes that weren't made for touring, mostly mountain bikes. And at that time, it was front suspension bikes. So we use racks because we like to stay out longer. We like to carry a little more gear. Sometimes because that's putting in more miles and really pushing ourselves. Other times we pack, some luxury items like a camp chair to find a nice spot to hang out in the backcountry. Old Man Mountain Racks also let us ride whatever bike we want. So you don't need eyelets on your bike. You can run a full suspension bike with Old Man Mountain Racks. The racks allow us to position our gear with a low center of gravity, so we don't feel held back by the weight of our food and sleeping bag and all the gear swinging around. Well-positioned and strapped-down gear is stable and secure, so we can just ride and rally whatever trails we like.
So one thing y'all say over at Old Man Mountain is that your racks let you ride whatever bike that you want. What do you mean by that?
Any bike you want. We make a full selection of what we call fit kits. The fit kits allow you to mount the rack to the through axle on the bike at the center of the wheel. Every bike has a center of the wheel. So if you have a bike you love, but it doesn't have eyelets on it, it doesn't matter. One of our axles and the included gear that goes with it for the upper attachments, and you're ready to go.
Yeah, that's amazing. So what are some of the advantages of bike racks versus traditional bikepacking bags?
Personally, for me, I'm a small rider. I'm 5 feet tall, so my bikes are very small. I can't even get a water bottle on my mountain bike. So racks allow me to carry gear. And bikepacking has kind of been on this arc. It used to be called touring, and racks and panniers were the standard. Then we came up with small seat bags, frame bags, handlebar bags, And that was for fast and light trips or credit card packing, things like that. And they work great for that when you don't need to carry much. But it kept growing and growing to try to take on longer trips and longer sections of trail and rides without resupply. So now there are all kinds of new designs trying to stop these oversized bags from swaying around and getting in the way of your drop-up post, particularly with the seat bags. Really, the best solution has been here all along.
No, they really are amazing. And actually, my friend and I just went bikepacking for the first, well, it wasn't my first trip. It was her first trip, and she's 5'2", and finding a solution to fill that gap was really hard. How do you get all this stuff on your bike? And we actually got an Old Man Mountain rack to go on the back, and it really fit the bill. I mean, you're able to put way more stuff on. So proof of concept right there. They're amazing racks, and I appreciate you coming on to talk to us about them a little bit. If people want to check them out on the interweb, where should they go?
www.oldmanmountain.com.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for coming on today, Katie. We'll see you on the trails.
All right. Thank you.
Today's episode is also brought to us by Athletic Greens. I started using them because if you've noticed, food options have become increasingly faster and less healthy. Eating healthy these days can actually be kind of challenging. It can be a little bit expensive. It can be harder to find good and healthy options. And it can be harder to get the nutrients and the veggies that your body needs. So for me, I found that Athletic Greens is a great solution to help manage a healthy diet. With one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging. I take mine every morning in about 12 ounces of cold water. And it's a great way to start the day knowing that I gave my body something really good to get the engine going. Now, to make this easy, and we want to make it easy, if you'd like to try Athletic Greens, they're going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/bikesfordeath. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/bikesfordeath to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate in daily nutritional insurance. All righty. Well, the bills have been paid. Thank you for joining us on today's episode. All right, let's get to my chat with Scarlet and Flint Ziegler. One note about this episode, I actually talked to Scarlet first, and then after I'm done chatting with her, her dad hops on and we have a little chat. But before we get to today's episode, let's have my friend Miles Arbor kick it off with the Bikes for Death theme song.
You load up your bike, you ride away from home. You could be with your friends or you could be alone. You ride for a day or maybe more. You just love being in the great outdoors. Everything you need is strapped to your bars, including that new pillow you got from Santa Claus. And then you think, oh shit, to yourself. You left that super lightweight tent on the living room shelf. Bikes or death. Bikes or death. Podcast.
Do you have any questions or anything before we get rolling, Scarlett?
No.
Ever done
Not
a
really.
podcast before?
No, I haven't. I haven't done anything like this before until we got home from the Divide, and people were like, "Oh, we want to know the story," and then
Yeah.
we want articles, we want all this stuff, and I'm like, "Oh, I didn't realize that." So
it's a
yeah,
big
but we
deal.
were very excited. I think we had 2 podcasts and radio requests on the same day. It was from you and then another one in Orlando.
Oh,
Somebody.
wow.
So I'm like, okay, well, this will be interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, you've been doing this for a while, but I didn't hear about you until all the articles came out about Tour Divide.
We didn't really circulate anything too much. It was just I guess it's basically been a part, like riding's been a part of my life for so long that it's like I grew up and just riding, and it's never been really a big deal. That's just like, oh, I ride my bike. Okay, I ride my bike. But then it's kind of odd to us that there's people that are like, oh, she's riding a bike. She's 13. It's crazy. And I'm over here like, oh, is it? I didn't know that. So we like never really circulated anything just because it's normal to us. But I mean, there's been a few articles out on Restrap already.
Yeah.
About what I've done. Just a couple like little national forest rides and stuff. But then we already have a little bit of backing from the Erie Canal, which was fun. But I think that kind of helped to circulate this because people already kind of knew who we were. We had an article on the Radivus for that. And so now people are like, okay, we know who you are. Companies are reaching out, websites are reaching out. And so they knew us from our previous small interactions. And I guess the word has just spread. That was a massive thing because I've never done anything like this before.
I wish I had heard about you 4 years ago whenever I started the podcast. I would have had you on a lot sooner.
Yeah, no, that's all right.
No, I'm glad. I'm glad to get a chance to talk to you. I'm actually glad you're a real person. I was reading on the internet that you might not even be real, so I was worried maybe you wouldn't show up today. No.
The not real person in that one was the person circulating the rumors that I'm not a real person.
So for anyone who doesn't know,
it's not the new joke is like, oh, Scarlet's fake. You're not a real person. Everybody knows that.
Yeah. No, you're real. It's birds that are still in question. We have to question if birds are real, but we can definitively say that Scarlet is real. And next time somebody on the internet tries to troll you, you can just send them this podcast.
I'm real. Look at me. I'm here.
For anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about, so there were several articles that got published recently about your Tour Divide run that you did with your father, and on singletracks.com in the comments, some guy was making a lot of hay, saying you might not be real, saying it's impossible to go 40 miles on a mountain bike downhill. You can't complete the Tour Divide in 42 days, all these things. It was all a bunch of rubbish, but I'm curious, what did y'all make of that? Did that get under your skin at all, or how did you take that?
When I first saw it, so I work goats, and I show goats, and there's a big show called the Farm Show, and it's a lot of livestock and all that. And I was showing there, we were staying there for 4 days, and we're staying at the complex, sleeping in the complex. So we were already on zero sleep because you just run out of time and then lose our time, and it's suddenly midnight. And you're like, oh, it's midnight. We didn't know that. But so of course, I'm exhausted, and then we're up really early, and I'm just scrolling through my iPad, and I get this call from Dad. He's like, oh, your Single Tracks article went up. I'm like, oh, cool. So I went through and read it because I didn't write that article. That was from Jeff Barber. So I'm like, oh, I'm curious to see what he put out, because we were all wondering how it was gonna go. And so I read it, and I kind of scrolled down to the comments, because I always like reading the comments, and I'm just seeing all this, and I'm like, what's interesting? Kind of confused. So then I just ignored it. I'm just like, I have worse things to worry about than somebody. And Jeff's already sticking up for me. He's out there defending me. And I'm like, there's really no reason for me to get involved in all of this, because I'm wondering if I'm going to make it worse. So I'm just going to let it alone, and I'll deal with it later. So, but then Dad had, he'd gone up, and he posted a novel up there on explaining questions. And he's like, did you see my comment? And I'm like, yeah, I saw your comment. Of course, I saw it, and I'm like, so this is why the page is so long. I'm really glad he posted the comment, but Dad takes things, he writes things way longer than they need to be. So, like, he will, this is not a lie. He will use a thesaurus for text messages.
Oh, nice.
Like, he'll have to look up in the thesaurus, like, a synonym for some random word he wants to use in a text message.
I like it. Well,
So
I
we
can't
found out
throw.
about it, we're like, okay, fine.
I can't throw shade. I always say brevity is not my strength. I have a tendency to ramble both in word and in writing. So I can't throw any shade. But I think what he was trying to do is maybe not speak directly to that one individual, but maybe speak to a wider audience that might come across it and kind of explain your lifestyle, and you've been doing this for a while, and you're homeschooled, I don't think he was necessarily baited into that one guy, but if I had to take a guess, I would say that y'all probably get comments and maybe criticism and kind of questioning, the validity and the what's a good word? Whether or not it's just a good idea for a 12, 13, back when you were 10 and 8 years old, a young lady to go out there and do these types of things. So I'm guessing y'all have kind of heard this type of thing before.
Yeah. We've had the cops called on us because, like, it's just because people, like, again, this is unheard of. Like, nobody sees a kid out on a bike with her father, a pedal bike, and like riding her own bike, hauling her own gear. Like, it's unheard of. So we've had people call the cops on us just because they've never seen it before. And every time the cops just like, I have to respond to it. You're fine. But like, I have to come out here. But it's just, they don't know what's going on. They usually think Dad kidnapped me. But the cops, like, honestly, if you had kidnapped her, you wouldn't be forcing her to ride a bike.
Yeah. Yeah, anyone knows, most, preteen girls, you excluded, and not to speak to all of them, but I have a 13-year-old daughter. And if I was going to kidnap her, the last thing I would do is put her on a bicycle and try to force her to ride 800 or 1,000 miles or whatever it is. I mean, that's a recipe doomed to failure. Have any of these people approached you specifically, or do they just call the cops and
usually
tattletale on you?
Kind of both. Sometimes it'll be like people will like come up and talk to us and have a conversation, like at a grocery store or whatever, and then the cops show up, and we already know who this was. It was the lady that talked to us outside the Price Right, that was like talking to us about yoga. This was in Little Falls. This is a true story. But then the cops just show up and they're like, well, we heard from this lady. I don't know if you know her. We're like, oh, we know her. That's for sure. And then sometimes it'll be like somebody passing us in a car or whatever, or at a gas station. They just see us go by or stop, and they'll call then.
At what point did you start to realize, because now you are aware that what you're doing is way outside the norm, and people are calling the cops on you. People are legitimately concerned. I mean, they don't know what to make of what they're seeing. Right. At what point did you start to, and you alluded to how this is just normal for you. So at what point did you start to realize that what you're doing is unique and special and different?
I can't answer that question because I guess it like hasn't hit me yet. Because again, I grew up like this, so it's still like not out of the norm. And I'm also homeschooled, so I live a bit of a different life than everybody else. And I guess I don't really have any kind of a basis of any of this. So I can't really say like I woke up one morning and had this big realization that I'm like, oh my God, I'm unique. I'm doing things other people don't do. It's like I've never really had that. But it's just like dad will come up to me and be like, there's nobody else doing this. You're crazy. And I'm like, but I haven't had the big realization. Like, it's just a part of my life. It's just like, it just fits in the slot. I'm like, yeah, okay. But
That's cool.
yeah, I mean, I guess it's, again, like, I don't know. Because then the other thing is people are like, oh, the Great Divide. It's so long. It's so crazy. But when you're out there doing it, it doesn't feel long. It doesn't feel hard or crazy. It just feels like another ride. Now, obviously, after effects hit you when you come home. We're still dealing with that and probably will be for the rest of our lives. But
what do you mean by that? The after effects?
Well, there's been some issues. And I'm gonna try to word this right because I don't want to not take anybody off. But basically, we all kind of got some effects from the time away from home, because it's like it doesn't matter how many times you've done it, who you're going out with, how long it took you, you're gonna have an after effect. You're gonna change from the divide. The divide's gonna change you, but it differs from person to person, time to time you do it, the distance, and it depends on, like, sometimes it'll be different for what hits you the most, and it'll be the terrain, it'll be the terrain, it'll be the time, it'll be the sights,
the beauty.
It'll be the beauty. It'll just be. It depends on. It just depends on on who you are, and I know what hit me personally and my mother was the time, because like I said, I work for a goat, or I'm a goat girl. I work for a goat farm, and I love goats just as much as bikes, and I just, like, they're my dream. So it was hard for me to be away for that amount of time. It was hard for me to be away from them. It was hard for me to be away from school. It was hard for me to be away from all of that, because, like, I've been working for Jen, who owns the farm that I work for, and I've been working for her for 3 years, and I just love it. And like, that's the first time I've ever been away from home for 2 months. Away from working for 2 months. And that was kind of hard on me. So I know some of that stuff hit me. The other thing is, when you're out there on the ride, like, the views are great and all of that, and the physical side of it's hard and it's great, but eventually you get these points where there's really nothing to do, so you just think. And you're thinking, and eventually you kind of think all the thoughts that you can think. So they just keep going and going in, like, one direction, and you can't really get them to turn around because there's nothing behind them to think about. So then you just start thinking about, like, the oddest things. And I'm still dealing with that. And I know it sounds weird, but that's kind of just how it is. And that happens with like every ride, but, like, the longer the ride it is, like, the different the effects. And so, like, all of that kind of hit me. But my mom kind of realized she wasn't really happy with her marriage to my dad, like, the way it was working out and the way it was going. So she kind of got hurt, and she's trying to work through that with him without divorcing. I'm trying to get through this. And he was having panic attacks, which we didn't know this until we got home. But apparently it was like there was a lot more stress on him than anybody really imagined, just from the divide. So I think that's what hit him, was the stress. Because, like, yeah, I take care of myself, but I'm still his responsibility. I'm still just 13 or 14 now, but he felt really responsible for me, and that was hard, being away from, like, we were without cell service for 4 days. We were without food and water resupply for 4 days. Like, and that's hard. But apparently, like, it was impacting him way harder than we ever realized. So he kind of got home, and he was having some panic attacks, some mental breakdowns, and so we were trying to deal with that, and he's getting better at it now. He's started going to therapy, and he's talking about his feelings. He's realizing, like, kind of what his issues are, like mentally, like what he does that led to that. And he's trying to like calm that down. And yeah, like we're doing good, but it's just stuff's changed.
Wow. That's interesting. I mean, it really speaks to, I appreciate you sharing that, but it speaks to more than just the physical toll that something like this can take. And it really has a profound and lasting impact in your life, you know, in your personal life. I just learned about you that you are very mature, you are very emotionally intelligent, and also that y'all are a pretty tight-knit family, and it sounds like you share a lot, that y'all are really close.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to have that family dynamic right now, just because it always ends in an argument. Like, I'm feeling like I'm not really happy with our family dynamic right now, because it's like we have to watch a movie because anything else will anything else will just blow up, and there'll be arguing, and I'll walk away, and then be asked, why did you walk away? Well, you guys were arguing. We were having family time. No, we weren't having family time. So it's like that's getting really hard, is to not have any quality family time anymore, because it always ends in an argument. So
yeah, that's tough. I'm sorry to hear that. One thing I try to reflect on and keep in perspective is, much like bike packing or bike touring, you know, these are endurance efforts, and our life is an endurance effort, and there are going to be peaks, and there's going to be valleys, and there's going to be hard times. And I know I'm divorced twice, and I'm not recommending divorce, but it just speaks to my own personal relationship with knowing how difficult relationships are. And I think we do ourselves a disservice when we try to pretend like these relationships are easy and everything's fine. The truth is that relationships are hard. They take work. Life can be challenging and take work. And that, you know, that's okay. But we need to, I think, recognize that that's just part of the process. And hopefully, you know, the end goal is where we're trying to get. You know, we're trying to get to the end of the divide, and there's going to be beautiful spots, and there's going to be low spots. There's going to be mechanicals. There's going to be all the things. And that's all part of the human experience, you know?
Yep. This too shall pass.
I say that all the time. This too shall pass. Very good. I like it. Let's talk a little bit about how you were introduced to cycling, and maybe this will speak a little bit more to your family dynamic. But yeah, I mean, this has just been a part of your life. So when and how were you introduced to cycling?
So I was 2 when we did our first tour, and I know Dad was kind of looking for something that we could all do as a family that wasn't really, it was like kind of out of everybody's league. It's like we all live completely different lives, and we have always lived completely different lives. And what was happening was, like, my mom was at a desk job, as we call it. She was working for Bosch, plastics engineering, and he was taking care of me, and I'm of course 2. So, but he was trying to figure out something that we could all do together. Like he's always been a biking person, but he wasn't really into the touring side of cycling at that point. He was doing freestyle and the little bikes. So he was trying to figure out something that we could all do together that wasn't like we find it's really hard for the other 2 people to step into one person's realm. So it's like, it's kind of hard for everybody to step into goats with me, because I've been working them for 3-4 years, and it's hard for them to be able to walk into that. Same thing. It's kind of hard for us to walk into my mom's sewing, because she's a seamstress. It's hard for us to kind of go in there because she's a pro at it. And it's like, she's also a perfectionist. Sorry, Mom, but, so it's hard for us to walk into that. It's hard for us to walk into my dad's realm of fixing bikes and working at Ski Around Top, because again, he's like the pro at that kind of stuff. So we're all So it's hard for that, but touring at that point, nobody did it. So we could walk out and start just do something that nobody else did. So none of us were pro at it and none of us sucked. So we were just going to do it as a family. And it did eventually morph into something that my dad and I did, but we kind of fell in love with it. And we're all surprised we fell in love with it because the first trip sucked. We decided to go the week between Christmas and New Year's, and we were living in North Carolina at that point. So we were going to go.
And how old were you at this time?
I was 2.
Oh, okay.
So
do you remember this?
I do. Not like fully, but I remember bits and pieces of it.
Okay. Amazing. Yeah.
I remember it was like the trip was a mess. It was following hurricane something, some hurricane. I don't remember what it was. It was like Katrina or whatever, whichever ones hit the islands down there on the coast and like decimated everything.
Sounds like Katrina.
Yeah. So it was right after that. So everything was a mess. People, like there was really like nobody there. And the people that were there were like, what are you doing? This is following a major hurricane. Why are you out here trying to camp when it's cold? And we had strapped cat litter boxes to the bike and had canned food in these cat litter boxes, and Mom forgot a can opener. So we're toting these massive boxes full of canned food that we couldn't open, which means we couldn't eat, because Mom decided we're going to bring canned food because it'll last. But what good's canned food if you can't get into the canned food?
Not great.
No, so we were riding a tandem, and I was on the back, and then it was Mom behind Dad, and then we had a bob trailer. And we got on the ferry because you have to take a ferry from one of the islands over down to Ocracoke, and we got on the ferry, and we were longer than every vehicle on the ferry. And we got up to the ticket booth and they're like, well, it's $2 a bike or $3 or however much it was. And Dad's like, well, there's 3 people on one bike. And she's like, well, it's still one bike, so I guess I'll let you through. So it was like, it was quite the trip, but we liked it. And like, yeah, it was the worst week we could have gone. We had no idea how to pack. We were riding through hurricane damage, but I guess we had fun.
Type 2 fun, right?
We're still doing it.
Yeah. When did you personally internalize cycling, self-supported cycling, and kind of make it your own rather than it being, hey, we're doing this as a family? Because at 2, you're not making decisions. Your parents are just taking you. So at what point did you internalize this and make it something that you love to do?
Well, I was kind of transferred over to doing self-supported as I got older. So we purchased a Yuba, which is like a big cargo bike, and then Dad messed with the runner boards in the back, so that way my front tire of my bike would just drop down into it. And then we could just strap the bike onto the Yuba and he could haul me.
Oh, that's cool.
So I would have like a quote, I had to do 5 miles a day. And then I had to do 10 miles a day. And then I had to do 15 miles a day. And I had to do 20 miles a day. And then I just had to ride. And I could have them whenever I wanted, but I still had to ride. And then we soon stopped bringing the Yuba, and I did that. And I kind of realized, and like, I guess I just kind of realized I liked it. I liked the independence. I liked the endurance. I like the grit and determination needed to be able to finish a ride. And it was also something I could put into homeschooling. Because in Pennsylvania, when you hit 3rd grade, you have to start logging days. You have to have your subjects, you have to take a test, and you have to start submitting a portfolio. So suddenly, like, everything you did, because like when you're in 1st and 2nd grade, nobody really cares what you do. They're just like, you're in 1st and 2nd, you're good job, because you have to learn to read and write. I just kind of like taught myself to read almost, because I would just look at books and I'd kind of start making the connections. Okay, when dad reads this book out loud, this is what he's saying. So this must be what this word is, and like all that kind of stuff. And we just kind of worked on it, and I started reading probably around the age of 2 or 3, or whatever. And so it's like cycling was kind of a lot like that. Was just I liked the independence of all of it, and it was something I could make on my own. And so I started kind of going with that.
Let's talk about, because I was interested to learn more about how you dovetail cycling into your homeschooling and what the overlap is there.
Oh yeah, sorry, I lose track of what I'm saying sometimes.
Oh no, you were right on point. But
the thing with cycling is you can count it for a lot of different subjects. So once you get into high school, you can take it's like social studies, math, science, English, and art and humanities. That's all you have to take. And then obviously you should take your phys ed.
What for is it? Do it again.
Year 5. Year 5. Science, math, English, social studies, and arts and humanities.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So
I thought I heard 4, but go ahead.
Yeah. No, sorry, I talk pretty fast.
No, you're good.
When you're in when you're in middle school and elementary school, you have to have a bunch of subjects. So obviously you're 5, but then you need to have phys ed, music, P, and I think there's 2 more. But maybe it's language. I feel like there's another one, but there's a whole bunch more. Yeah, that would be under arts and humanities. But there's a whole bunch more that you have to take. So, but cycling can count for a lot. Oh, geography. See, that was the one I was leading up to, and it's one I forgot. But,
you got
it. It's geography, so you can use cycling for geography. Obviously, phys ed. You can use it for science. You can use it for sometimes English if you're reading about what you're doing. History, like the Erie Canal. We read books on history of the Erie Canal and how it was built and when it was built and what was happening at that time. So you can count it for so many different subjects that it's really helpful for your homeschooling.
Yeah. And I don't even think that's cheating. I've said on this podcast, and I truly believe it, you will gain a greater understanding of your own city or a different area when you're riding through it, when you're experiencing it slowly, when you're seeing how the river connects to the stream and how the railroad connects to the streets and how even the suburbs change to the city and how the traffic patterns change. And I mean, you are getting a much more immersive learning experience through riding your bike than you could if you were in a book reading about it.
Right. That's the other thing that we do with homeschooling is things like 4-H, things like cycling, things like goats, things like shows, things like all of that, all of the hands-on stuff. I always feel so much better than going and reading and doing my workbooks, because then I'm kind of experiencing it for myself, and I'm learning what I need to learn. That's really going to help me in life. Like stuff about the physical world, things about the outside world, and how those things work, because I can learn all I can about my school subjects and then turn 16 and have no idea how to drive and have no idea any parts of that. But if I go out and ride my bike and I watch traffic and I already know how to ride the roads, and that'll transfer to a car really easily. I can already drive, and it's going to be no problem when I get to 16 to learn how to drive. So it's I feel that applies to almost everything in your life. Is just the more hands-on you do, especially with cycling, you can just apply that. And it works so much better.
One thing I talk about is how, one of the great benefits of, self-supported cycling is it is self-supported. It is you learning how to be capable, learning how to navigate, learning how to rely on yourself, learning that, you can then internalize and know for a fact that you are a capable person, that when challenges arise, you can deal with those. And that is something you can take and apply in your entire life. You know, that lesson to learn how to rely on yourself, that you are a capable human being, can be applied in anything. And I feel like from there, it's just about applying yourself in the direction you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think we kind of touched on this, but so, I mean, I think the question I was going to ask you is like, this really isn't your dad pushing you, and kind of, you know, prodding you along because he wants someone to ride with. It does seem that this is absolutely something that you want to be doing.
Yeah. Yep. So there's parts of cycling that he will just do that I'm just like, no, I'm not doing this. I have no desire to do this. He likes to do lots of winter rides. Like a lot of them. And I'm good. We do the November Ride of Pain, which I can do, but I won't go
Tell
out.
Tell me about the November Ride of Pain. Let's hear about that. Because I just heard it mentioned in an article, but no details. So I was curious.
Yeah. Okay. So it's the first week or two in November, depending on the ride we're doing. And we'll just go out and we do a ride. Sometimes we'll do a trail. Sometimes we'll just plan a ride. One year we went out to Jim Thorpe, which is a little historic town near New Jersey, or maybe it's in New Jersey. No, it's not in New Jersey. It's just kind of along the border. We did a couple of the different canals over there, and we just looped it back home. We've done some national forests, maybe. We've done the Cieno Canal. We've done the Erie Canal multiple times for our November ride. But every year we go out, and it's just like a tester, and it kind of gets you used to the cold. Because like I'm always asked this question because I don't ever wear like a heavy sweatshirt or a coat. I always forget my coat, and sometimes I regret it, but usually I'm just like, I'll be fine, good. But I'll be like walking around in a t-shirt while everybody else has 2 layers on, and they're like, "What's wrong with you? Where is your coat?" And I'm like, "I'm comfortable. Like, why are you bundled up?" So like that's
So why don't you like the winter riding if you are adapted and it seems like you handle the cold pretty well?
I prefer having the option of warmth, but and it's like I'm good, and it's like dad'll ask me like, why aren't you ever on your bike in the winter? Why aren't you thinking about bike trips? I'm like, because it's the winter time, and it's like winter transitions into spring, which is kidding season. It's like height of school season. And so it's just like a lot of different things besides cycling, because I view cycling as more of a summer thing. So spring, summer, fall, is I'm usually pretty heavy into cycling, but winter, I usually take a reprieve, and that's when I start planning rides and I do all that kind of stuff. And then everything just ramps back up as soon as we hit spring.
Yeah. Sounds good. It sounds like balance, you know, you
Yep.
take some time off and then you're eager to get back out there. And, you know, obviously I preach bikes, but I think some time off the bike can be a good thing to reinvigorate your desire to get back out there. And if you're doing it all the time, if you're always out there, then, you know, maybe it loses a little bit of
I'm kind of done. But, yeah,
which is fine. Yeah. Then you can go play with your goats and take a little downtime and get excited about the next thing. Yeah, that's cool. So it seems like from researching for this episode that a lot of your, prior to the Tour Divide, a lot of your bike tours were on like rails to trails. Is that accurate?
Yes. So there's a couple of rail trails that we do. It's usually like most of it's road riding and trail riding, just like a mix. But yeah, we do. Usually what happens is we'll find a route that we want to do. We see if there's any rail trails near that, and we'll incorporate them into the route because they're a good reprieve from cars and all that. They're usually pretty historic. So again, the homeschool thing. So we usually will route our rides like through any rail trails that there are near the route, and we'll ride those instead of the roads.
Yeah. I love rails to trails. I wish we had more in our area, but it seems like at least within a pretty close vicinity, y'all have a pretty rich supply of opportunities to go ride rails to trails.
Yeah. One like Solstice Century from Restrap that we do, if we like usually we create our own route, but this past summer, Dad did it. I didn't. I bailed at the last second, but he just rode over to the York Heritage Trail, rode down. It connects to the Torrey Brown Trail. Rode down to the end of that, turned around, and came back home. And so we just like did the whole century on the rail trail, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I love them. I'm wondering though, so as I was thinking about this, it seems like most of your experience has been mostly paved on rails to trails. And I'm wondering how that prepared you for the Tour Divide, which is, 90% off road and a lot of climbing up to 12,000 feet. What did you have to do to make that transition?
Well, we did a couple of training rides for this. One of them was the Blue Ridge Parkway, or was the Skyline Drive Blue Ridge Parkway. And that, so that was mostly just like, that was literally up riding the ridgeline of the Blue Ridge Mountains. And like literally riding the ridgeline of the Blue Ridge Mountains. So it was some great views, but it was a lot of climbing. So that kind of helped build us up. And that one we did, I think it was 3 weeks before the Divide. There's a trail, or not a trail, it's a route from nowhere on the Pennsylvania-New York border to nowhere on the Pennsylvania-Maryland border. And we did that.
Wait a second, are those real places called nowhere, or you're just saying?
They're literally like nowhere. Like,
is everything okay?
Well, the light just decided it's done.
Okay. Well, okay. That we can, as long as you have electricity, we're still talking.
I was gonna say, like, whoa, did we lose electricity? So I gotta like look out there and see if the dining room light's on. Can you still see me?
The goat stopped powering the generator or whatever. Yeah, I can see. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, so that's called the Pennsylvania North-South. It's just a little route that a guy made, and it's most Pennsylvanians do it, or like Pennsylvania cyclists. And so it just takes you like straight through I think it's like 5 national forests or something. So Pennsylvania it has a lot of national forests. It's not like West Virginia, which is all national forests. Like that's all it is. But it does have a lot of national forests. So it takes you through a good bit of them. I think all of them, could be wrong, but or state forests. So we just had, so it just takes you like straight through the middle, and we did most of that. So we were a little reroute because it was my dad's birthday and he wanted pizza, and the pizza shop we were supposed to hit in Shippensburg or something, went some random town, starts with an S, ends with Berg, but it closed permanently. So we decided to just reroute to Harrisburg and get picked up there. And there was a pizza shop because that one closed too, called Need Pizza, like need as in knead the dough, not
yeah.
But that was a really good pizza spot. He's like, we could just reroute over there and then have Mom pick us up in Harrisburg. I'm like, okay. So we kind of routed over to Route 15. I think, yeah, it was Route 15, and then kind of headed down to Harrisburg through there.
That's one thing I picked up on is your mom is kind of the silent third-party support system in the background of all this. I mean, she's picking y'all up at the end of the Tour Divide and at the end of all these trips and dropping you off. I read one 700 miles from home, I think in DC, and then y'all rode home. Is that something that she's happy to do? And
yeah,
or is
well,
it...
she's got, so we have a menagerie of animals here. So she prefers, like, so we call it wife touring versus us touring. And us touring is obviously like, if we can't find a camp spot, we'll just pull off on the side of the road and camp. Wife touring means we're routing 2 towns to get a hotel or a nice campground. It's very glamping. They will have to, if we camp at a campground, they have to have showers or running water. So like that's like the difference of camping. So she typically stays home to take care of the animals and house stuff because we have dogs, cats, goats, and it'll just
all the fun stuff.
Yes.
So when did you get the idea, and whose idea was it? Was it your idea to do the Tour Divide? Was it your dad's?
So it was mine. We did the Erie Canal time trial and then went down to Florida and did the time trial there, or the time trial route there, because there's like a race across Florida. It's called the Cross Florida Individual Time Trial. Sorry, it's not a race, but they have like a group start there. That's in December. We didn't do it last year, or we didn't do the group start, but we decided like we were going to go do the route because it was something we've been wanting to do for a while, and it just kind of kept getting pushed to the bottom of the list. And then Dad's like, okay, we're like waiting in line for a COVID test, and he's like, so we have to do a November Ride of Pain. What do you want to do? And I'm like, well, I don't really feel like doing November Ride of Pain, but what if we do the Erie Canal and then head down to Florida and do the Cross Florida? And he's like, okay, we can do that. So then it like finally got done because
when you say just to fill in the blank there real quick, like you finished Erie Canal and then drove straight to Florida. You rode to Florida.
So we did the Erie Canal, got picked up in Albany. Sorry, we always do Buffalo to Albany. Always, just a thing we do.
Yeah.
But we did that. Got picked up. Got home at like 3:00 in the morning because Mom's like, we could stay here or we could go home. And I'm like, let's go home. We want to go home. So we did. We went home, and we hung out the next day. One of our friends came over. His name was Nick, and he was riding. So basically, the Erie Canal, we were going to do the time trial starting in Buffalo. Mom dropped us off, went over and met Nick in Albany. They stayed at a Warm Showers host. You know what Warm Showers is?
Yeah.
Okay. So Warm Showers host Luke, they dropped off the cars and stuff, and then they were going to slowly ride back and meet us on the Erie Canal. They got to the first night, realized this was freezing cold. We did not feel like doing this. So they just turned around and headed back to Luke's and stayed there. And so we were done. And then they drove home, and then Mom drove us home, and Nick stayed the night at our place, and then he was heading to DC or something. So then I had a banquet for 4-H the next day. It was 2 days after we got home from the Erie that we went down to Florida. We had made the mistake of deciding that it was going to be a good idea to, or I should say because this was my idea, to drive the full 14 hours in one shot. I was like, we could just do it in one shot. I think it'll be a good idea. Mom's
Sounds
like,
reasonable.
Okay, 14 hours, we can do this. Okay, Uncle Jake calls, my dad's best friend. It's like, hey, you wanna meet up sometime on your way to Florida, maybe at Benny's Pizza? Sure, we'll meet you. 2 hours goes by, 3 hours goes by, sitting there talking to Jake and Kane and the other kid that was along, and then it's gas stops, and it stops for the dogs to go to the bathroom. Yeah, we didn't get down there till like 3:00 in the morning, because then again, we didn't leave our house until like 10.
Yeah.
We were supposed to leave like at 7, but it didn't happen. Just kept like, oh, I'm forgetting this, forgot that. It's just like chill. And then we're like, man, this is a dumb idea. We did eventually get down there, ridiculously late. And yeah.
How long is that Cross Florida ITT?
That's about 300 again, I think.
Okay. So it's like west to east or east to west?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
It's like it kind of goes across and then does like a little loop and then continues across. Because it goes through the Ocala National Forest or State Forest or something.
And the Erie Canal is also it's like 320 miles, something like that?
That's 370.
70, okay.
Or 60,
so yeah,
maybe 60,
you did,
I don't know, like that.
You did, close to 700 miles in about 8-day time span. And after that, you decided you were ready for the Tour Divide or what?
Yes. Yep. That's
was
exactly
the Tour Divide something that was already on your radar? Like what?
So yes, it was like it was there. And it was just kind of it was like a joke, like, oh, we have to do the Divide. And then it suddenly became serious. I'm like, maybe I should do the Divide. Yeah, you want to do the Divide? Yeah, I'm serious. I want to do the Divide. Oh, really? Yeah, I do. So it's just kind of like, that was the conversation. And then it just happened 9 months later.
Wow. So it's interesting. I'm trying to wrap my head around this. I mean, like, you are very much kind of going on your own journey. Your dad is obviously supporting you. What was it that made you feel like you were ready to take on the Tour Divide? Because, you know, you're not a newbie at 13, you are not a newbie to the sport. You know the pitfalls, you know how hard it is. You know that the Great Divide mountain bike route is one of the hardest off-road bike routes in the world. So, I mean, what was it that was inside of you that was like, I am ready to do this now?
I don't really think there was anything saying I'm ready. I think it was more like, let's do this. Because one of my high standing character traits is stubborn. I'm very stubborn. So
that's a good one.
Yeah,
if it's applied in the right way.
I decided, I'm like, I feel like I should do something besides the canal. Because the other thing was, and this kind of came out in the Single Tracks article, or at least the answers that I sent to him. I don't know if it came out in the article itself, but it was like the Erie Canal was great. It was fun. I'm happy about the time that I got, but I didn't feel like it was pushing me to my limit, because it's like the Erie Canal is just this, it's a canal, which means it's pretty flat. It's pretty easy. Yeah, we did it in the cold, but it was still just a canal. It's all it really was. And honestly, like, our second family ride was on a canal. It's just like, it's kind of an easy ride, and I wanted something harder because I knew I could do something. I knew I could do harder things. I've done harder things. National forests and all of that kind of stuff. Like, that stuff is way harder than a canal. Maybe it's not as long as, but it's definitely harder than. And so we just, I wanted to show that I can, like, again, like, we didn't really push. We didn't really push things out to the public and like advertise my story too much until the Erie Canal. And like, so it was the canal, and I'm like, well, now people just know me as the canal. Like, that's all I did was the canal. So I want people to know that I do more than a canal. I am, for lack of a better term, better than a canal. I can do more than a canal. I want to do more than a canal. So, and the Divide seemed to be a good one. I'm like, well, I will show that I can do the Divide, because the Divide is harder than a canal.
I mean, even personally, myself, I have not done the Great Divide mountain bike route. And the idea of it, I think, as it does with most people, it's intimidating. It's a big task. It's, for you, it's 42 days on the bike. Did you have concerns? Did you have fears? Were you intimidated by it? What was your personal relationship with how you were feeling going into it?
Well, so at first I felt like I was feeling pretty good. But now I kind of got really nervous. I kind of had like a nervous breakdown, again, lack of a better term. So basically, I went up to Jen's, and I'm just like kind of iffy about it. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to go away from home for this long. And I kind of just started crying. And then Jen's like, well, maybe you should talk to your mom. She's always very supportive of me. I love Jen. She's awesome. But she's like, you should, like, maybe we should just let this play out, and we'll wait. You can stay here, and we'll just wait for your mom to wonder what happened to you. So I just stayed with Jen's for a while, and just stayed there. Oh, I don't know why. I don't know why we didn't just text her like immediately, be like, I don't know what's going on, because then we ended up like almost being late for our flight. But we did. That's what happened. And so mom eventually did come up, and she's like, so what's wrong with you? Like, why did you want to go? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm just scared of it. It's intimidating. I feel like this is Dad's thing. Well, it wasn't Dad's thing. This was all my idea. This was all me from the start, but I decided that was another excuse. That was another like thing that just came out. And I'm just like, I needed something to say. It's Dad's thing, but it wasn't. So then Dad came up and he's like, you have to try. We shipped bikes and all that kind of stuff. We have to try. I'm like, fine. And he's like, we can just cut out whenever we want to. I'm like, okay, maybe we should do that. I already knew that I wasn't going to cut out in the middle because I started it. So I'm just like, but I had to go. I was going to start it and then I was going to finish it. And that's what happened.
Do you know what it was that you were afraid of? Do you know what?
I don't really know. I think it was the time. I think it was the time away. It's like time is something I always have issues with. I can't ever. I suck at keeping track of time. I suck at like working with time, time management. Like that's something that I'm like. That's one of my fatal flaws. Is I cannot do time. And like that amount of time, like away from home, away from my responsibilities, kind of freaked me out. And again, like the mileage even wasn't really being like 2,900 miles. Yeah, okay, sounds good. But the time it's going to take is because it's hard dropping everything that you ever know and just dropping it for 42 days.
Yeah. Well, now like, the other way to look at that now is, you do have a perspective on what it's like to be away from home for 42 days and the things that you love to do. And, that's going to come with pluses and minuses, but, you can gain a greater appreciation and understanding for the value of your time and the value of, the things that you do at home and the relationships you have at home and all those kinds of things. And, sometimes lessons are hard to learn, but they can still be very valuable.
Yep, exactly. It's like one of the things is it takes losing something to realize how much it means to you. And it took losing what I had to realize how much I love it, to realize how much it's like, I feel like every kid has this dream, has this thought. It's like, when I'm 18, I'm going to pick up, I'm just going to run away and I'm going to go and just live and it's going to be great. But then it's like, once you do it, you're like, can't do this. Like this just doesn't happen because it's like maybe there's kids. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's kids out there that could do it. Maybe they would leave and they'd just be like, "Yes, this is great. I love this. This is awesome." And but I'm not one of them. I'm like I know I sound really weird right now, but this is like I'm a country girl. We stay where we are, not because we're hermits, but just because like this is what we love. This is what I love. This is the place I call home, and I don't want to pack up. I don't want to dig out my roots and strap into my bike and just run.
It doesn't sound weird at all. We're all on our own journey, and I think whatever your path in life is, finding out what's important to you and what you value and being able to maximize those things in your personal life is something that we're all seeking to do. And some people may get that by leaving home and going and riding the Tour Divide. And that might be what they find peace and solace in. And some people can be happy and content where they are. And the important thing is that you find what makes you happy. Yep.
It's like, so like I do have a book coming out soon, hopefully. And it's just about the divide. It's about my life in the divide. And then there's like, it's about my two worlds. And there's been a lot of thoughts on identity since I got home and just like who I am. I mean, like still a woman, like thing in there, but I'm just like, I don't know who really, like, I'm trying to figure out who I really am, what I really love, and like what the rest of my life is going to look like, and like who I'm going to look like. And so I'm just like, I've been trying to figure all that out recently, and it's like it's hard for my dad right now, but he's like so what do you mean you have two worlds and two lives? I'm like, well, there's Scar and there's Scarlet. He's like, I give up. I don't understand. But it's like, again, like my name is Scarlet. I'm Scarlet Ziegler, Scarlet Meadow Ziegler. And oftentimes, once I finally get the point across that my name is Scarlet, I'm not Charlotte, I'm not Skylar, I am Scarlet. And then typically the reaction is, oh, that's a pretty name. That's what I get is, oh, it's a pretty name. It's a lovely name. It's beautiful. Those are things I don't use to describe me, are pretty. Now, if you come to me and you say, oh, your name's Scarlet, that's a unique name. Okay, I can take a unique name. But it's like, then we went out, we have this ride every year that we do, and it's called the Cumberland Miss Rules Us. And we do it on a canal running from, it's the C&O Canal, runs from Washington, D.C. to Cumberland, Maryland. And it's like, I don't know, what do we do? Like, it's 30 miles out, 30 miles back, split up over 3 days. So it's like, we typically go from Point of Rocks to a little campground called Huckleberry Hill, right past Harper's Ferry, and then Huckleberry Hill down past Shepherdtown to Killingsburg Cave. And two of my friends were along, Cole and Evan, and they started calling me Scar. I don't even really know what sparked this, but that's what they started calling me. And I've had people call me Scar over the years. Just like I'm fine with it because honestly, like I told Cole, and he like asked me like, why in the world would you say this? But I'm like, as long as you don't call me sheep, I don't care. But that's I don't like sheep. But he's like, okay, fine. But they just started calling me Scar, and I kind of realized I really liked that because like the name Scarlet, obviously, like I said, I feel like it implies something like that I'm just the normal teenage girl, but I'm really not. I feel like Scar kind of embodies that a little more. So I say I'm Scar. I try to, if I remember to introduce myself as Scar, I sign myself off as Scar because that's who I really believe that I am. And there's people I can be Scar around. There's people I need to remember to be Scarlet around because she's still there too. I feel like she's my people face. Which Jen is very face. So
the cool thing about what you're talking about to me is that you're being very thoughtful about, you know, who you are, who you want to be, the things that you value in life, and not only that, but you have the freedom to explore those things and to work through those things. And in my, opinion, a person who is thoughtful and intentional with their actions will eventually land where you need to and should be. But I think it's when you are a sheep and you are just following the crowd and you're not really thinking for yourself and you're just kind of like going along with the flow. I think that's where the real danger lies. And so I think, I guess my thought is, as an older person that's your father's age, don't put too much pressure on yourself. You got lots of time to figure it out. And the most important thing, like I said, is that you are thinking about it and that you are trying to work through those things. And that will only lead you to where you want to be ultimately, because you're going to seek out the things that you want. You're going to seek out the people and the experiences that you want in your life. And that road, I think, in my opinion, leads to where you naturally want to be, Mm-hmm. Tell me about this book. When do you think it might come out? I read that online and I thought that was super cool. I'd be very happy to read it once it comes out.
Yeah. Okay. So the book has been a work in progress since we got home, and this keeps reminding me of the cattle thing. We were at one point we were supposed to get cattle, and the deadline just kept getting pushed off. When are we getting cattle, Mom? We're going to get them in February. We're going to get them in March. We're going to get them next year. I don't know. Like, it just kind of kept getting pushed off, and I feel like that's what's happening with the book. And I'm trying to be like, I don't want you to be pushed off. Like, you're important to me. I don't want your deadline to be just like going. But it was supposed to be New Year's. It was supposed to be done by New Year's. It actually didn't even start out as a book. It started out as an article I was supposed to send over to Restrop. And then I got to it being like, I don't know, 10 pages. And I'm like, I think this is a book, not an article, because articles aren't 10 pages long. So I started I'm like, okay, it's just going to be a book. And it was supposed to be done by end of December. And then I had the news call me. Or Dad reached out to our local newspaper, and he's like, well, the editor's like, maybe she can write an article and I'll proofread it and then post it. And I'm like, okay, sounds good. So the book kind of got put on hold for when I was working on that article. And then, of course, it was Christmas time, and we make all our own Christmas presents. So then it just kept getting pushed off. I'm like, February, it'll be done by February. Then we had some talks about my homeschooling, and Dad's like, you need to be working on your homeschool workbook and not just typing your book. I'm like, okay, fine, spring. And then it's like, I'm having literally no time to work on it. So it gets pushed off to summer. So I am hoping it will be done by summer. Because the thing is, like, I'm working on it as much as I can, but it's been, like, I'm working on it as much as I can, but it's gonna probably not be on the top of the priority list until school season lets out, which is whenever I get my 120 days per subject, or 120 hours per subject for my high school credits. So once those are done, I can start like actually putting some more time into the book. And yesterday, I finished all the journal entries. I got all of them typed up. And it would take me forever because it's literally sitting there staring at your book and just copying whatever you wrote down previously. And of course, then I'm like, I don't even know what I wrote. Like, I can't read my own writing because it's so messy. So I'm like, I was like dreading that. And then I kind of slept off 8 days before the 8 days before the ending. I stopped journaling, or like it just didn't get done. So I've been having to like remember what I did, which is easy. I remember all the days, but or at least like those 8 days. But I had to keep like typing those up, and I finally got them done last night. And I'm like, because in the morning I like finished off the second to last journal entry. And I'm like, this is the last day I have to do. Like, it's the last day, and it's the last journal entry I have to do. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna get it done. I got
exciting.
Done.
Well, you only get one chance to write a book, and I've been on a Hemingway kick lately. For the last year, I've been reading a lot of Steinbeck and Hemingway, and I watched a Hemingway documentary, and he wrote 39 different endings to The Sun Also Rises. And, books are hard, books are not easy to write. That's, much like The Great Divide, that is a huge undertaking and will be a huge accomplishment. So, it'll be done when it's done. That's when the books get done.
Yeah. But I'm like, it's fun. I do like English. It's like my top few subjects are like science. That's top. I'm vaguely good at art. Social studies is easy this year because it's anthropology, which is pretty much literally social sciences. And then it's English. And like English comes naturally. I always love reading. Like book reports can get a little just like, I have to do another one. But like whenever I'm doing like a personal story or whatever, I'm like, oh, this is great. I love retyping these things. I love writing these things. So like it's not really a big, I gotta work on this now. It's like I always do love English, just the subject itself, and the book falls under English, so I'm like, we're good.
Yeah, that's super cool. Here's a question for you. What would you tell the Charlotte or Scar, whichever one, before the Tour Divide, now that you've completed it? What's one thing that you would tell pre-Tour Divide Charlotte or Scarlet? I just did it. I screwed up your name.
It's okay. I had
You're the one who put that in my head. What?
Yeah, it's okay. I had a gymnastics instructor that for 2 years she called me Skylar, but I didn't do anything about it because I was afraid of her. Like everybody else was afraid of her too. Like she was intimidating. So, but like she called me Skylar the entire time. Even though everybody else called me Scarlet, they all got it, but she called me Skylar. So it doesn't really bother me.
I think gymnastic teachers are always intimidating. I think that's like a requirement for being a gymnastics teacher.
Yes.
So what would you tell her? What's a piece of advice you would give to her that you wish you had when you went into it?
Probably something along the lines of like, bring an extra charging cord. Remember where you put your knife, because I continue to lose my knife in places. I just like put it in a random spot. Bring your down pants, and bring down booties. Because Dad had previously made those, and like actually out of my old down coats that I would grow out of. And like he always liked them, and I'm like, I want one of these. And then I was so unhappy that I didn't bring enough warm stuff along, because it got so cold. And of course it's August, so we're just like, it's August, we're good. And then we're like freezing our butts off, like, oh, this is not good.
What about what's next? Obviously, like you said, the Divide left was a huge, impactful event in your life. Have you started to think about a potential next bike thing? Are you putting it on hold?
Yes.
Where are you at with that?
We are. We're planning on doing a ride over in the UK, overseeing Restrap and meeting the people over there. We did a ride this past year, 2022. So our opening ride was with the guy named Jamie. He's a Restrap ambassador and lives in France, but he's Scottish. So he's a Scottish man riding for an English company and living in France.
Perfect.
You can keep that straight. But we've been wanting to do another ride with them because like we had so much fun. So possibly we'll invite him and see if he wants to come and ride at least part of it with us. But we're going to start from London and ride up to Leeds and see meet the Restrap team. And then we're going to head up to Ireland or something, and then swing down to the Isles of Eg, or the islands of Eg, that Mom wants to see, and then head back to London and get another flight home. So I was just like, it probably won't be too long, just because, like, again, requirements at home, so we won't be able to take up like too much time. But then
that's cool.
So yeah, there's that. We're planning on that. We're planning on. There should be. I feel like there's a list here of what we had done previously. Yeah, because I don't really remember. I don't know. It's here somewhere.
But I guess the overarching idea is that you're not done with bikes.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, there's that one. The other big one, that I can remember, was solo CNL. So again, it's another canal. I know this is like kind of going against what I previously said, but I'm gonna try to do it solo, like just me. Yeah. My original thought was like, I want to do the Trans Am solo, and then Dad's like, I would have to be a sag wagon for you, and I'm like, taking away from the solo part of the trip if you have a sag wagon. So he's like, I can't just sit here and like let you go off across the country. I'm like, I could ride from my aunt's house to Nick's house and then back home. He's like, no, because my aunt lives across the country in California. Nick, who did who's with Mom on the Erie Canal route, now lives in Boulder, Colorado, and then we obviously live in Pennsylvania. So my thought process is I could just fly out to Aunt Annie's, ride to Nick's house, and then just ride home. So maybe it's not like the exact Trans Am route, but it's a Trans Am going across America.
Yeah, it's not the official route, but it is across America.
Exactly. But Dad's like, no. I'm like, ugh. But whatever. I'll do it. I'll wait a couple years. I'll like, maybe next year maybe next year we'll do that. Maybe I can build the trust this year that I can handle that alone. And I don't know, maybe somebody like meets me in Colorado or something.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. You gotta work up to it.
Are you living? Yes. Okay, you're good. But so we are gonna do the canal. This is the canal we've done many times. This is definitely a big staple for us. It's often used as a training ride. We just usually it's often an opening ride too. So like first ride of the year that we do coming off of winter. Just because it's out there. It's not hard, it's full of towns, all that kind of stuff. So we end up it's a lot of times to use it for a family ride. So I'm going to try to do that one solo. Because like I said, we know we know the whole trail. We know all the towns. So it's like that one would be an easier, but that one runs from, it's the C&O Canal Gap Trail, which is another rail trail. The C&O runs from, DC to Cumberland, and then it connects to the Gap Trail, and the Gap Trail is Cumberland to Pittsburgh. So, yeah. And so I would do that and like do a yo-yo on that.
Okay. That's still epic. I mean, again, you're one of, so there's Eden Tarji. I can't remember his last name, but Eden, he's been on the podcast. He's 13 and he's done a couple solo self-supported trips. I think you and him are the only ones in the entire world that I know of. So it's, I know it's normal to you, and I know it's just become a progression of your life and what you've been exposed to, which is really neat. But I'm really glad to get a chance to talk to you and share your story, because I mean, I'm a father of a 13-year-old, and what you're doing is unique. And it is really cool, and it is cool to see somebody who is capable and inspired to go and do these types of rides. And yeah, it's really cool. And I appreciate you sharing your story. I was really excited to talk to you. I was so excited I couldn't fall asleep last night. I was like just thinking about it's. I'm honest. I didn't get much sleep last night. I was just like laying in bed thinking about all the things we might talk about, and I was excited to talk to you.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I've been looking forward to talking to you too. So you inspired me to like actually read my journal and not just like type it. And actually like when you're typing a journal, again, you have no idea what you're reading. Yeah. Like I could be talking about a bear attack and I have no idea what I'm talking about. Just like bear attack, head on. So now but I read it. I'm like, it's actually pretty interesting. Like looking back at the pre-Great Divide life, like life on the divide, like that's interesting. Like kind of looking back at all of that. So I'm really glad.
Oh, for sure.
I'm really glad you inspired me to do that.
Awesome. Well, I can guarantee you there's going to be a lot of people that are definitely interested to read your book. So yes, no pressure to finish it anytime too soon. Take your time with it, but whenever it's done, let me know. I definitely like to promote it on the show and help get the word out there. And
awesome.
I think you and I should chat again someday. It sounds like you're going to do a lot of cool things, so maybe we can keep in touch and have you back on the podcast one day.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'm trying to keep track of everybody who's like emailed me or commented or like said I'm really excited or whatever, so I can like remember to send them a copy.
Smart.
So that way, yeah. So I'm like, I should be making a list of these things. I don't, but that is it's on the radar.
You got a lot on your plate.
You will definitely make the list. Guarantee on that.
Okay, good.
So you get an autographed copy.
Well, is your dad around?
Yes, he is.
All right.
He's been sitting out of picture listening.
Oh, he's there. He's listening the whole time, huh? He's been creeping on our conversation.
Yes.
Hey, Scarlett, it was a pleasure talking to you. Thanks again.
It was good talking to you too. Thank you so much for reaching out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bye.
What's up, dude?
Oh, not too much. Yeah.
What did you think of? So you were listening to the interview that we had. How do you think it went? How did Scarlett do?
Oh, it's totally Scarlett. Like you got 100% Scarlett, and that's all that I think. That's all that you can ever ask for is like somebody just being authentically them. And that's what that's to me like what I'm always encouraging when she's doing anything. So I'm always stoked. Scarlett has. So I was a singer-songwriter for a lot of years and like mostly just up and down the East Coast with like tour, me and I would take a drummer along, and I would often get accused of like talking too much during during sets, because I'd like, I don't know, sometimes you just don't necessarily feel like playing music, you know what I mean? Like you're playing the same shit over and over. And I would have I remember the one time this bar owner walked up in the middle of the set. He's like, I'm paying you to play music, not talk. It's like, oh yeah. And I'm like, well, I think some people love what I'm doing, but maybe nobody did. I don't know. But her little rambles and her little, her little rabbit trails, it's so authentic and so good. So yeah, it's, I always like hearing Scarlett's perspective on, her own perception of what we have here. And, so I guess to some degree, what has been created, and it also is like a little insight of like maybe what's working, what isn't working, like what does she really feel ownership of, and what does she maybe not, or it's always that balance of like, for me anyway, trying to figure out if I'm supporting her or if I am pushing her, and like. I don't want to be like, there is always a time, I think, as a parent, that you have to kind of push your kids, and it's like, hey, it's time to step up here. This isn't necessarily fun, but this is what we have to do because of, whatever societal norm, or there's chores to get done. If you want to have, animals and pets, there's responsibilities. But then there's also like, we can push as a parent, we can push them to be like us, or like to want to do our hobbies, and cycling's really difficult. That I'm constantly trying to monitor my own balance with her, because I want her to love it. I want her to just love what she's doing. And if she's not feeling like she is, then that wouldn't be what I want for her. Like, I just want her to be herself, So yeah, no, it was good. It's always fun to listen in. I get a kick out of her. I just think she's the best. So.
She's awesome, man. I mean, I was curious to get your perspective on, I mean, she is clearly a very mature, very emotionally mature, very thoughtful and insightful person at a very, very young age. It really speaks to, I think, the experiences that y'all have allowed her to be exposed to. How aware are you of how unique she is? Because she doesn't realize how unique she is, and what she's doing is unique because, for lack of a better word, there's a bubble. Y'all live on, it sounds like a farm of sorts, and she's homeschooled and doesn't have that comparison that can be a thief, right? That when we compare ourselves to the other, it can rob us of so much. And she's not robbed of that. She's free to explore and be whoever she wants to be, which is really amazing. How aware of you of how unique and special that she is?
I think I am. Like I said, like running the BMX track, and I don't know, even like the touring that I did as a musician and travel. I mean, it's mostly bars and all of that, but I also would stay with all kinds of people. You meet all these kids. And I was constantly reminded of like, well, most, 13-year-olds are, all through her life, it's like, oh my God, like most 10-year-olds are not doing what she's doing, but also just the thinking of how she's thinking and seeing life. And I do try to check in with her, and we have these conversations, because I think our emotions and her emotions, like her being very mature, she's taking in so much. And I know, like, after the divide, a lot of emotional things were happening in not only in our household, but then also individually with, post-adventure depression. And it was just really wild. I learned so much. And I'm going through a lot, but then I'm also trying to make sure that I'm checking in with her, because that's been a process and a part of our lives together, especially her and I, because I recognize that she doesn't necessarily have, she does have lots of friends, but yet friends her age aren't aren't connecting on the same kind of level because she's so emotionally aware of what's happening in her own. But Scarlet does lots of she does some journaling, but she does a lot of songwriting. Like, she's very musical, loves to, she plays piano, she plays harp, she plays guitar. And then, I think just over the years, I always had pieces of paper laying all over the house and guitars laying, and there was I still do, but not as much. But her growing up, just watching me create songs, and that was always an outlet. And now I'm watching her use the same thing. But it's who else is doing this stuff? Kids aren't doing this stuff. And, but I think I think it helps her, and I think she's always growing, and she's been such an inspiration to, I get this a lot from friends. She inspires parents so much that they're I want, not that they want their kid to be just like Scarlet, but they recognize her emotional awareness. And that, I think sometimes we set a standard and we say, well, kids are just kids and they operate on this level, it's right here. And we almost put a cap on it, not realizing that kids, and we all I don't know, what do they say? We operate on 10% of our brain or something. We operate on such a low level as basic everyday humans. So I definitely think that Scarlett's super, super special. I think that she has so much to offer. And again, it's the same with my love of cycling. I try really hard to not promote her, quote unquote, promote her in a selfish thing of look at what I did. Look what my kid's doing or whatever. But we try to channel it through encouragement and through inspiration so that her story can get out there naturally, but that we can hopefully encourage other people and not promote competition, but promote, just love of learning, love of life, love of, connecting with ourselves,
Yeah. I didn't mention this in the email, but another ulterior motive for interviewing y'all separately was, I think there's value on relying on yourself and not having maybe your dad sitting next to you to look over and get the answer from, and not that I was trying to put her in the hot seat, but
no, it's perfect. It's so good. I mean, I was stoked that was how you approached it, because Scarlett's really independent. And that she mentioned, and that's I was kind of sitting off, and I was working on a scheduling thing. So I wanted to I think it's so cool to listen to her. I'm fascinated with Scarlett, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Big supporter. But I love that that's how you did it. And I love, because as she was mentioning about this idea, her interest in solo riding, going out all by herself. And I've been trying to navigate that, I don't know, what does that really look like, and how does that feel for me? And what are the, I guess, really what are the real dangers? And then what's just, are we creating? And then there's always that thing, you just can't protect, even if I'm along on a ride, I can't protect her from everything. But I love the fact that you did the interview with her totally separate, because that's Scarlett. She's 100% a solo kid,
Well, I mean, we're talking about, being self-reliant and self-supported. And so for me, it does feel appropriate to talk to that person individually and get their individual story. Before we skip over this, because I think this is important. We're talking about Scarlett at now 14, a young lady potentially going out and riding solo, self-supported. At some point, she's going to. I mean, it's clear, right, whether it's this year or next year or whatever.
Yeah.
What are some of the conversations you're having with her or with yourself about what is appropriate, what is, quote unquote, safe, and obviously just from your perspective and knowing your own daughter?
So for myself, this is probably where the sense of average or normalcy, I'm tipped to a certain direction, because we have done so much travel by bicycle and ended up in really odd positions. But also my own lifestyle as a musician, I was always put into really weird situations, anytime you're at a bar at like 2:00 in the morning, it's bound to be something bizarre that could happen, you know?
Yeah.
And so maybe that's, but I don't know that I don't have any doubts in Scarlet. That's definitely not it. The biggest, I would say, fear that I have, or like trying to mitigate, is I'm not real big on social media. I'm not real big on that whole thing. I just never really was. We're trying to like tell our story and keep people up to date, just because like we've had so many people asking about it, like, and they're I don't know if I want to use the term living vicariously, but you almost get that sense, you know, like people are, they're really, but they're also getting ideas that how they can apply that to their own family dynamic, maybe.
That's what I was thinking. It's planting seeds, right? Like you don't, and I think about the podcast is like, you just put it out there and you're just planting a lot of seeds, and you don't know what those seeds can maybe one day be. And so I agree with you. Like social media shouldn't be like the goal, but it can be a vehicle to plant seeds and inspire others. And that's fucking cool.
Yeah, definitely. So, but with that becomes more of an awareness of like, people then know what you're doing. So like, take for instance, the solo, like her going out, if that is promoted heavily, you have more of a potential for the person with ill intent to actually know how to locate. Like it's and I hate that I even have to think about this, but this is the kind of things that go through my brain. We love the idea of dot watching, and we do it a little bit, but like we'll put out to like my family, and we put it out to even like on public. Hey, check out what Scarlet's doing. Like we're riding, you know, I think we did it with the Skyline Drive, like people could follow along, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But and a lot more people than I expected were like, they were pretty stoked on that. They were like, "Oh, you guys are here," and they would send me a little text message, or and with that is that side of it, which is positive feedback, and also a feeling of connectedness. So I know on the divide, when we had days where we couldn't interact with anyone else due to cell service or whatever that may be, it was difficult. Like after a couple of days, you're like, oh wow, like we are way out here, and we saw some people, but none of our people. You know, like you didn't get to talk to, you know, for Scarlet, it's like grandma and pop or her mom or whatever. And so there's these positive things to it that you're feeling on your network, and you're feeling connected to some degree. And I love that part of it. Then there's also the dangers of like, there are people with ill intent, and they can literally find your exact location, you know. Is that you know, are there statistics showing anything? I really have no idea that this has happened or whatever, but it's, as a parent, like I think of this stuff, you know. And I also don't really buy into the whole idea that like we need to use social media to like tell everybody what we've ate today and what we're, you know, doing every second.
Sure. So
there's a balance in all of that. And but that's probably the biggest one. It's like, I don't personally, I've had a really great life, and I haven't had a whole lot of really bad experiences, with, you know, people like, I don't know, doing anything to me or seeking me out to let, you know, I've never camped and had somebody like run through the campground and like slash my tent or, you know, try to stab me or something. And yet, you know, things can definitely, I guess things can happen. You do hear some stories, you know, I can't think of the guy's name, but several, I guess it was months ago, maybe it's been a year now, but the guy's been touring a ton, and this was on the Radavist, because he's written articles and stuff, and he got jumped. He was in Mexico, but got like literally like guys were, you know, kind of waiting at this dirt road and jumped him, and you know, I think they knocked him out. Like they didn't stab him or nothing, but they stole everything he had, and then he's got to like rebuild all this, you know, try to get back home or figure out what he's doing. So it does happen. There are dangers out there, and I try not to focus on those things, but try to I guess be aware of it and not be stupid about the whole thing, you know? So
The most dangerous thing she can probably do is get her driver's license, right?
Oh, exactly.
I mean, if we're talking about statistics, that is the
right.
most dangerous thing she could possibly do.
Yeah. And what's interesting is they say that, the majority of accidents, car accidents is what the statistic was, happen within 5 miles of your home. Obviously, it's where you drive the most. It's also the most familiar. So when she's out,
you let your guard down.
Yeah, exactly. But then she's out riding her bike all the time, and like she rides to the library and to the grocery store and to friends' houses and just goes on bike rides. And it's like we think of like all of our neighbors coming home from work and they're in that statistic now. And, like anything could happen at this point. Anything can happen at any time. We can't keep our kids totally safe, and that idea of like living in a bubble, like it just doesn't happen. But then as a parent, you can also like let your imagination go crazy sometimes.
Oh, for sure. I have some advice or thoughts. You didn't ask for it, but here it comes. I'm going to mansplain for a second.
Oh, good.
Yeah, Pepper Cook. I don't know if you know her. She lives up in Alaska now, but she hasn't been doing as much as actively in terms of like promoting her cycle tours, but she used to do a lot of it. And she shared a story on this podcast. One time she was staying, I don't remember where, but it was at some campsite, and she was by herself, and she posted on social media, where she was, like, oh, look at this cool place I'm at. And without any warning or anything, a guy came up with some beer and knocked on her tent and wanted to hang out, and it was after that she realized, don't post until afterwards, until you're already gone. And I think that's great advice. I mean, I think, in terms of the dot watching, that's a great, that device is so liberating in that, especially from a parent, like you can watch, you can follow along, you need to know where she is, and she can push that SOS button at any second. And my thought is like, I've never been in a situation either. I did have one encounter at 2 a.m. when I was on a bike trip, and I was stopped at a church to get water, and a cowboy that was coming home from the bar, he like stopped and like, what are you doing here? And, it was a little tense for a second, but, I kind of explained. But my thought is always like, listen, buddy, I pay a lot of money for this little device. I push this red button and every freaking cop, sheriff, ambulance, and anybody else is going to be here within minutes. And not only that, but everybody knows exactly where I'm at right now. So where do you want to go with this? I feel like just having that if you ever got to that point, I feel like just having that device really is liberating. And so, my advice is like, I don't know. I mean, obviously whenever it is appropriate, for her to go and do a solo trip, just don't share your location when you're there. And then I think it is valuable for, the greater good of what, me and probably you, you organize events and try to introduce people to cycling and the outdoors, is like, we want to share these stories. We want to inspire people. We want to get young people out there and on their bikes and doing incredible things. Just share it afterwards. You don't have to share it when you're there. Right. I've always felt like also, when I'm on a trip, usually the last thing I want to do is engage with social media. That's not what I'm there to do. And so I'll take pictures and I'll, remember it, and then I just share it afterwards. So anyway, those are some of my unsolicited thoughts.
No, that's definitely been like kind of where I've gone with it. It's like, this will be the year, I think, unless, something drastic happens but Scarlett's been really talking about it. And that's been a topic that keeps coming up. And I just think, cycle touring has been such a positive part of our lives. And so I know that she feels super comfortable in that realm. You know what I mean? So it makes sense to me why she wants to explore this idea of independence within that kind of placement or activity of what we've been doing, because it's not anything new. It isn't like she's going to go learn how to sail by herself, and go on a trip. Like, this is something she feels really comfortable in, and a world that she's just grown up in. So Yeah,
I think that's an
think
important perspective that she is on. She has more experience at her young age than, a lot of people my age or your age might have, and that's an important perspective to keep in mind. Yeah, she might only be 14 years old, but if you started when you're 2, there is a natural progression, and she has all that information. She has all those, essentially an arsenal of a toolkit that she can draw from when she goes out on herself. You're not sending her out all willy-nilly to go ride her bike.
Yeah. I think that's usually what happens when people are negative on this kind of stuff, is that they're applying it to their own perception or their own little perspective. So, the parent that has a 13-year-old that, whatever, just plays video games. And then they go, wait a minute, I would never send my kid out. Like, well, I would never send your kid out either. That would be ludicrous,
Yeah, good point.
Yeah,
I wouldn't send your kid out either. That's so good.
We were talking about this when we were on the Great Divide, because we had a number of people they were genuinely concerned. They were trying to be very supportive, but that would voice concern. Scarlett and I would see them at a campground or at some place that we're resupplying. And typically it was like an older gentleman or a group of older gentlemen. I was surprised how many retired, retired white men seem to be like, hey, this is the time to go do this thing, but they had all this gear, they have like panniers on, and they're in it, right? They've got all this, and we roll in and we've got a really, really streamlined system because we don't carry anything extra. But we also know, we've already done 4 tours leading up to the divide. We know our pack system. We know how much food we can carry. We did our research, and we have a longer history of touring, but they were really concerned about are we carrying enough water? And do we know? But what they were covering, let's just say a 60-mile stretch, would take them X amount of time, but it only took us half of that, So remember the one stretch that we did, this guy did not want to let us lead. He was trying to convince me to camp with him, and, because he felt he could carry even water for us. And I was like, no, I think we're good, man. It's a 70, I think it was 70-mile stretch, but it was over this one pass. We did it within one day, but it took him, he later texted me when he knew that we were safe, and he texted me, it took him 3 days. Yeah. So, he's
That's a
going
different experience.
Totally different. So we had to carry water for 1 day. He was trying to carry water for 3 days. And yeah, from his perspective, we didn't have near enough, because we couldn't carry water for 3 days up over that thing, but it didn't take us that kind of time. So I think of that with all of this kind of stuff, when people are commenting maybe on an internet post or just talking in general,
Yeah. I'm curious, Scarlett didn't come into this by accident. You and your wife seem to be living a very intentional lifestyle. She's homeschooled, all this stuff. Can you speak a little bit to your motivation for raising Scarlett homeschooled and for exposing her to these types of activities from a young age?
Yeah. So when we found out that we were going to have a child, I think I overthink everything. That's just how I operate, So I really wanted to make sure that from the very beginning, what are the overarching goals? And one of the biggest things for me is time spent, quality family time. And I didn't grow up with a lot of money. We were really poor growing up, but that was really stressed in my household. And so that's been a big part of my life. But also my mom always fostered this idea that we should, learning is an everyday ongoing process, having that desire to learn new things and that we can approach life with a constant love of learning and wanting to make, and it's very experiential. So going into now I'm the parent. When Scarlett was born, I wanted to try to foster that. And I think Scarlett like kind of brought this up of when she was, 2 years old, I realized that what activities we were doing wasn't feeling very family based. Like we would go on bike rides maybe, but I would just take Scarlett in like a little backpack, or, when she got to a bike seat, I could put her in that. But maybe my wife wouldn't go, or it didn't, I don't know. It just seemed like my thing. And then I would take her. I was always going to skate parks and spots and like riding, and I would take Scarlett, but she's literally just sitting somewhere. I'm like, I'll go over here and ride this thing and go back and check on her. And it was just felt disconnected. And yet here's this activity and this thing that like, I kept thinking could be really wonderful, So bike touring, when I saw it, I remember seeing a picture, and it was just this couple, and they had panniers. They were like in their shorty shorts. It was like from the 1970s or something. And I'm like, that looks awful, but that makes sense. Like that, all of a sudden it's got the travel thing, and it's got experiences that are spontaneous, but you can also plan your experiences by, the area or whatever. And that totally made sense. So, but that also crosses over into everything. So even before Scarlett was what we would consider school age, I was already homeschooling Scarlett. Like I started off right away with a semi-structure. Scarlett responds well to a structure. She likes having a bit of a structure in her life, and then that adapts. That has to, as she's developed more of a attention span, or just as we're growing and getting older, we're changing. So it isn't like you set a structure and she stays with that her whole life, but she likes to know that, okay, I'm going to come back to this, and at this time I like to do this. And then it's seasonal also. She's like very, like whenever it comes to like traditions in our family, Scarlett's always the one like, well, this is what we do Christmas time. This is what has to be done. She really adheres to that. So I started that, like even kind of watching that when she was really little, began incorporating some, like, I guess I'd say learning times, but they were very fluid, because I didn't want it to be like, I guess I felt like the American way of learning through public schools a lot of times is all of a sudden the bell rings and now it's learning time. This is when you learn. And when the bell rings again, you're done learning. And even if it's a subconscious thing, I just question whether that's A, healthy, and B, like, where does that leave us when we graduate, right? Like, are we just done learning? Are we done really experiencing life? And so I just didn't want that. I wanted Scarlett to, and like the same with, we do ease off in the summertime with book work, I would say, the things that are required by our state. But the learning side of it, I mean, we're still taking trips, and that's why we still take trips during our quote unquote school year too. Like, I just want it to be a constant fluid thing of learning happens every day. Learning happens every moment. And some learning is conscious, some learning is I'm reading this thing, or I'm experiencing, a canal. For her, she loves the canal systems and like the stories with those, the people that helped to build them and why were they built and what was going on behind the scenes, maybe politically or just socially even, that was driving the need for these ways of transportation and all of that. But as she's experiencing this stuff, like we're learning very consciously, but then there's also that, I guess it's implicit learning where it's kind of like riding a bike. Like your brain's learning, but you don't even realize that, you're leaning and balancing and learning how to make all this stuff function, Those two things, I just think a lot of times the way that the American education system has become has made the conscious style of learning so like, I don't know, defined or so like now it is, now it's not. And I don't know that I just didn't want that for Scarlett. Like I just wanted her to love it,
Yeah, I couldn't not agree more. I'm curious if you've read the book Last Child in the
Oh
Woods.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So for people listening, I highly recommend if you have children to read that book. And what Flint is talking about is covered in there. And we're really, we're growing up, and you and I are about the same age, almost identical in
Right.
age. So we grew up in a time where, you could just get on your BMX bike and ride around. And I mean, my parents wouldn't know where I was the entire day. I was just
Same.
gone exploring on my bike. And now everything is so much more rigid. The playgrounds, I actually took a picture and posted on my personal Instagram, but like you go to the playground and there's just a list of rules that you have to adhere to.
Yeah.
And, you can't go play in your neighbor's tree because he'll sue you if you like break a limb or something. And what it really touches on is how is that having a negative impact on our child's development, on even their fine motor skills, as you touched on, with learning to balance a bike and process information quickly as you're riding your bike and a rock's in the road or something happens and you need to react to that. We're taking those opportunities of learning both physically and mentally away from our children. And I couldn't help but be thinking of this book while I was talking to Scarlett on she is a perfect example of what happens when we give our children unstructured learning and immersive learning opportunities. I mean, I'm not an educator, but I would say that you could put Scarlett. God, she said Charlotte, and now it's like in my head. Scarlett, that you could put her up against even my own 13-year-old child. I only have her half the time, so I'm gonna blame her mom. But I think you put her up, and what you're seeing is a young lady who is very mature, emotionally, physically, and capable, and thoughtful, and insightful, and confident in herself, and all these things. And you're talking to a person. You're talking to somebody who is speaking from their own experiences in life that she can draw from. It's not something she read in a book. It's not something her mommy and daddy taught her. She's talking to me as a person who knows what she's talking about because she has had the experiences and the opportunity to do that, which is
for sure
awesome.
I always love hearing Scarlett talk to adults. Like that was the other thing of like wanting to listen to at least to some degree with this interview, because it's like hearing her talk. And as she mentioned Jen, which like she calls her boss. Like she's been working up at this goat farm and they milk goats. Her boss Jen has a herd of goats. They milk them, and then Jen makes cheese, goat cheese, and sells it at farmers. She's amazing. Like Jen she's this super independent woman that has her own business. I can't talk more highly of Jen. But Jen also just lets Scarlett be Scarlett, And but when I hear Scarlett talking to Jen, it's like they're just having these adult, like Jen doesn't ever talk, like kid talk or talk, it's just like she talks to everybody else, and Scarlett's, her interaction with adults, I get a kick out of, because I'm actually seeing her, and she's, I guess to some degree, it's like, well, I recognize that she is a, 13, 14-year-old kid. But I love hearing her, like her little stories and yeah, like you said, she has real world experiences that are really kind of wild. And then she ties them in really well. Sometimes she gets really wordy, but I do too. So I'll take full credit for that.
So do I.
Yeah. But, like listening to her, like be able to bring those, like sometimes I'll be like, where is she going with that? And then it comes back to the point. It's like, oh, yeah, this is how it works.
I noticed that too. She did a good job of tying her experiences in, and having a direction with it, and really impressive. So let's shift gears here a little bit. Scarlett shared some personal things about After the Tour Divide. I'm curious, one, how comfortable you are with that stuff actually being out in the public domain, because we can edit this, and then also I wanted to give you a chance to share your own experiences with that to the degree that you wanted to.
Yeah, it is like, in my opinion, like that's exactly what's on Scarlett's mind. So I guess I tend to approach that stuff and I'm like, it's truth to her perception, how she sees what's happened since then. And, I definitely don't, it's not like I'm not embarrassed by it, or I'm not anything. Like, it's hard sometimes to hear as a parent because maybe some of what she's feeling isn't how or how she saw what happened isn't necessarily 100% true. It was filtered through her own somewhat limited, ways of seeing, just because we're not with each other 100% of the time. But at the same time, like, that is, to me, healthy and good. When Scarlett was born, and I've talked to her about this a ton, when Scarlett was born, the big thing, and I remember holding her, we still in the hospital, and it was, I had this little thought of like, I want to be authentic to this, to this person. Like, I'm 100% in as being a parent, and I want to be authentic, and she should see every part of me. Like, I didn't want to hide stuff. And over the years, I really tried my best to be that. And she saw my faults. She saw she saw so much. And I, sometimes like after it would happen, it's like, that, like I ended up stopping, I quit drinking, I think 3 years ago now, and had quite a relationship with alcohol, like playing music and just that whole thing. There were times of like, oh man, I can't believe that, Scarlett saw that part, that happened. And then I would remind myself, well, this is like, truly that is me though. Like I did that. Like that was, and it was also sobering, and it would help bring me back sometimes too, of like, yeah, like I'm bringing her along, like touring as a musician. I would often bring Scarlett with me. That had its ups and downs, but part of that was just like, I wanted her to see everything, but it was also a good, I don't know what the term would be, almost like boundary area where I went, oh, I didn't like that. I didn't like the Scarlett.
It made you face yourself in a different way, know? Yeah. You had some accountability.
Exactly. Because so many times, like when you're with your peer group, they're encouraging you. They're like, dude, you were so funny, like it was so funny that you forgot your wallet and your credit card at the bar because you were so drunk. But when Scarlett's along, it's like, now I got to call the bar and come back in with this kid. And I'm like, that was 100% me last night, and now I'm here. So being authentic, I just want to be authentic. So when we got home from the Divide, number one, no one had ever told me. I had never read an article. I had never, for all the years that we've been doing this, and while the Divide was by far the longest ride we had ever done, we've done lots and lots of tours. But no one had ever discussed, and I had never read anything about like post-adventure depression, and I knew nothing about it. I think my wife actually brought it up. And I began to like read some articles and try to find it. Even that was like, there wasn't a whole lot on it. But what's really wild about it is that you're operating, like we were operating, Scarlett and I, on this level of exercise that was through the roof. Like we averaged over 70 miles a day. And when you're exercising and putting your body through that, the endorphins and all of the chemicals that are flowing into your brain are at a massively high level. And which is what exercise does, right? Like they talk about like the runner's high and all these kinds of things, right? But when you're doing that for like 42 days straight, and then we got done, we had a period of a couple days where there was an overlap due to my wife picking up her cousin to drive along with her out to pick us up. We just were at a hotel, and the bikes were so wore out, like the drivetrains were slipping so bad, like everything was just really hard, and it was hard to get the bikes in and out of the hotel rooms. But either way, we were not riding, 70 some miles, massive climbs and all of that. We just dropped off 100%. And then you have days of driving home. And so chemically, really physically and chemically in your brain, I'll just say in my brain, there was a lot happening, which also helped with this whole depression or depressed state, right? And then there was also, and I think Scarlett brought this up, I didn't recognize until partway through the ride, I was having panic attacks, and a lot of it stemmed. The responsibility hit me later. Like, I had planned the ride, and we were so excited, and Scarlett was so stoked, and then Scarlett had like her little breakdown, but right before the ride, like we were literally supposed to be leaving for the plane. And I said, if you want to go up and say, pet the goats up at Jen's and say goodbye to Jen, cool. And then get down here because we got a jet. And then she never comes home, and, but she had hers before him. Like, it hit her like, wow, what am I about to get onto? And we had this discussion, and really no pressure. At the same time, it's like, well, actually our bikes are in Canada right now. And, we should at least fly because we already paid for the plane tickets, and it'll be a fun flight. And literally, like, if she wanted to just get the bikes and turn around and come home, that would have been totally cool. Like, there was no pressure, and she just needed to know that I didn't expect anything out of her. But she also needed to like talk through what she was feeling afraid of, She was afraid of the lack of, really it's the lack of structure. It's the she really adheres to that. She likes having these routines, and, a goat barn functions on a routine. And so it was that mystery of like what's out there, but also like, what am I going to be like not having what I have here at home? So she had hers, then I had mine in the middle all of a sudden. And it was sort of sparked by seeing, a lot of signs about grizzly bears. And we had bear spray, and like we had done some lead up to like bear, safety and all of that. Like I was smart about it, but I didn't, I guess like, I don't know. I don't really know that it was overly done with like bear caution, but that was sort of like what brought it to, it was like the what do they say? The
tipping point.
Yeah. It was just like, oh man, like, what am I doing out here? Like, I'm responsible for this 13-year-old kid. Like, I can't even protect myself from a bear. You know what I mean? Like, I can't protect myself from these cars that are flying by us on dirt roads. And honestly, I felt really helpless. The landscape is amazing, but you feel really, really small in so many scenarios, and a lot of things built up, which makes sense. Like, now that I'm home and I've processed a lot of things in like different place, it totally makes sense what I was going through. I also didn't realize that I wouldn't have the cell service to be able to kind of talk things through with. So like I wasn't able to like call my wife and just be like, hey, I just need to air some stuff, like feeling scared right now, feeling whatever that may be. There was no network anymore. So in the middle of it, I had one panic attack. Scarlett saw it, came out like as me just kind of being really angry at my wife, really, over the phone. And afterward, I was like, I don't even know what I was doing, and it took kind of calming down and realizing I'm actually having a panic attack. And then I could recognize them coming on a little bit more, and then I could get myself calmed down. So I implemented some new things during the ride. Like, I would just type up text to my wife and to some friends, just really being honest with like, here's where I'm at. This is what I'm scared of, or I'm doing really well with this. Also let Scarlett know, like, talk to her about the whole thing. Like, I'm terrified. Like, I feel so much. It would be totally different if I was by myself, but like, I feel so responsible for you, and I think that's healthy, but it was also like the extreme versions of everything. So upon getting home, there was marital things even before the divide that my wife and I have been going through. My wife was going through a lot of stuff. Like all of a sudden, we all had 42 days of like totally out of our element. Like totally, we live, as is probably pretty obvious just talking with Scarlet, we live like really knitted together. Like we're in each other's space all the time, you know. I even like playing as a musician, even when my wife did have a desk job. She worked for a company, but for 7 or 8 years now that we've lived in Pennsylvania, my wife has been a caregiver for her mother with Alzheimer's. So my wife has been home for the most part. I'm also in the home. We work some like odd jobs and we help friends, but like oftentimes Scarlett will come along with stuff, and we're all around each other all the time. It's not like we both split and go to work and Scarlett goes to school, or even I leave and go to work, or my wife leaves and goes to work. Like we're very much, so now we have a long period of time where Scarlett and I are totally out of our element, doing this crazy great ride and experiencing all these things. But my wife was here at home holding down the fort, and it was wonderful to know that. But like, she was getting like, who am I? Like, there's nobody here to like make the noise and, you know, sing dumb songs and make stupid jokes and all of that. And like, all of a sudden, I think my wife had like time to just, who am I? Like, where am I in life? And just the same as my panic attack during the ride, you tend to take out those things on the people that are closest to you because you feel safe. You know, you like, I wouldn't take it out on like some stranger that we met. I'm more likely to take it out on like, you know, Scarlett or my wife or somebody that I feel close to, because it's safe. Like I can be angry with this person and they're still going to love me, kind of a thing. And I think that in the same way, my wife was doing the same thing. Like when she came and picked us up, she had a lot of stuff to process, and it came out on me because I'm safe. Like I'm always going to be there, you know. Unfortunately, it's hard for Scarlett because she was also coming off of the ride, and now she's thinking like we're going to jump right back into just how we were, and life is really, really different because like Jana and I have a lot of things just personally to sort out on our own levels. And then we're just now getting into the point of like, let's look at this now together. Like where do we go now? And it's really been very, very good, but not easy. Like growth is never easy, you know? So we try to include Scarlett in these conversations. Those conversations are super hard because they're often open-ended. Like, you know, well, what does Christmas look like? Like, are we going to still do this? It's like, well, I don't know. Like, let's wait and see what that looks like at the moment. Like, that's kind of where, especially where Jana is, you know, like she just needs to live in the moment for a while because that's where she's at, you know? And, but it's been really, at the same time, I love that Scarlett puts it out there. Like that's what's on her mind. That's truly her. It's also truly the reality of our life. And yeah, like I am so grateful that, that Scarlett has seen the process, and I try to keep her updated. That's why she's like, Dad started going into, see a therapist. Yeah, I did. Like that's just been one of the best things of that's ever happened to me, you know, is learning to really face, for me, a lot of it's aging. I mean, the divide was a good example. Like I do not recover like I used to. When my body starts breaking down, it doesn't just spring back overnight, you know? But also just facing the realities that I'm getting older and I always could set goals and I could meet those goals, right? I could set a goal to be faster, stronger, whatever that may be when it comes to physically, but I'm 43 and those goals aren't going to happen for a whole lot longer. Like I'm not going to keep getting faster and stronger. And you know what I mean? Like, I can maintain as long as I can, but the reality of life is that we do deteriorate. And I wasn't really wanting to face any of that, and really was very scared. The Divide was a great way for that to open up and to really see it. And unfortunately, I think that the society that we live in does not give enough attention to mental health. And so when somebody says, like, you know, I'm seeing a therapist, or I'm in therapy, or, you know, my child is in therapy, or, you know, my dad is in, it's almost like we see it as this negative thing. And I think that's really, really, I think it's really sad, actually, because those things it's not negative at all. Like, so many times we are just not equipped within our family units to deal with the things that we've involved. And some stuff is so out of our control, you know, and we shouldn't have to live under those pretenses and under these unconscious mindsets. So one of the things that I have found really helpful, there's a lady, and I found her online, and I'm usually like so against all of this stuff, but I came across this lady named Dr. Tori Olds, and she's in Austin, Texas, and her video series on transformational change was just incredible. And it's very science-based, but it's also very based around some like age-old ways of looking at our, like, what makes sense, you know, and why now there's science backing up these kinds of things. And I love her approach, and it's been really helpful. And then having a therapist, and I love the fact that we didn't hide, like, we're not trying. And I actually, like, with our social media, one of the things that we're trying to get out there and trying to figure out a good way to make that happen is a lot of people hit me up privately and said, I made some mentions in some posts about, like, post-adventure depression. And I had people hitting me up like, that is so real. Like, I had that happen, or I know of a friend of mine that, like, you know, ended up committing suicide or whatever. Like, it's been a really interesting outpouring. And I think that these kinds of conversations are so healthy and so good to have. And in this community, like, we should be talking about this kind of stuff and encouraging each other, not seeing it as this is, you know, a bad thing or a thing we shouldn't talk about. Or, like, my child should totally see that I had something that I didn't know what to do with. I didn't know how to handle this whole thing. And I got resources to be able to help me and to get myself to this better place, even better than what I was before, you know?
Man, I appreciate and love everything that you said. I couldn't agree more. You know, mental health is, for some reason, it has been taboo. And I think that our generation and the next generation will continue to break through those barriers. But just the same way that we go to a general practitioner to check up on our health and make sure our blood pressure is good and all these things, we equally need to be touching in with ourselves, whether it's just going for a bike ride and having conversations with yourself, but also being honest with ourselves about our own limitations and our own abilities to work through mental health problems. And there are professionals that do that for a living. And it's silly to have these resources and to not tap into them. And I can echo what, you know, you're seeing online. We do a end of year survey to the listeners. And one of the topics that was highly requested was more talk. I've tackled it in the past because I've like everybody, we've all had mental health journeys. It's not like if, but when, right? We're always going to have, you know, something at some point in our life, and we can all relate to that. So there is an outcry for more candid conversations surrounding mental health. And I do appreciate your candor, but at the same time, I felt obligated to ask you what your personal threshold was to share that publicly, because there is a stigma right. At some, you know, in some circles and stuff. And so it just speaks to where we are at society. But I think, you know, we're all struggling. And I think that, and it's one of the reasons I started a podcast, because you don't get this on social media, you know, like
Yeah.
We really need to break down the barrier that is there, whether it's through a film or a filtered Instagram post or whatever it is, that, you know, yes, Scarlet and Flint did something amazing and they've been on this incredible journey, but there's blowback from that too. And life is challenging and life is hard. And, and we need to have that perspective. We as a collective group of humans need to have that perspective. And through that, we can feel a little bit better about what's happening in our own lives, but we can also be supportive of other people who are going through stuff and be like, yeah, I've been there. You know, I know relationships are hard. I know life is hard. And that is a much healthier approach to, you know, mental health than making it taboo and something we can't talk about, you know?
Right.
So, yeah, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Well, well, I had a thought while we were talking, man. You know what would be cool? Because we're the same age. We both have a 13-year-old. Well, you have a 14-year-old now, but I would love to figure out a way for us to go on a bike tour, bike trip together somehow. I mean, we're worlds apart, but I feel a kinship to you. I like a lot of the ways that you're raising your child, and you and your wife are raising your child. Are things that I also believe in, I feel strongly about, and I take issue with, you know, I have from a young age, you know, this, you know, one size fits all school system that, you know, you have to check these boxes. And if you do, you'll be a healthy, loving, productive, successful human. And I unsubscribe from that. I don't buy into that at all. I'm not saying it can't work for some people, but I know for me personally, no dice, you know, that's not going to work for me. I also liked what you talked about, you know, continuing education and I think our school system did great harm for me personally by doing what you said, where it's like, okay, check in to school and now it's time to learn. And now you have all the information you need and now you're done. Yeah. And it wasn't until later in life that I really gained an appreciation, and I'm still gaining appreciation for a continued education to pursue my passions, to understand the world that we live in for a self-edifying reason, not because I want to have a cool job, but because I want to be a better and more well-rounded and understanding and empathetic person. And that has value and place in my life. And it was the school system that robbed me of that from a young age. I mean, they ruined education to a point where I'm like, oh, fuck learning, you know? I'll just be a dummy.
Well, I hear so many people like talk to kids and like, I don't know, it's really common for us to talk about what books we're reading. I thought it was interesting. I heard you say to Scarlett, like what you've been reading recently. And like, I'll ask kids and they're like, oh, I fucking hate learning. Or I just hate reading. It's like, where did that come from? Like, what is but there's this idea like that's not cool or it's not like, I don't think that's I don't think it's natural, to be honest, because we can gain so much information. And then when you really break down with this person, like, well, what is that you don't like about it? You know, and they have no real reason. It's just that they just want to go against what they're
boring.
Told. Yeah. It's like they just want to go against what the idea is of the whole thing. And it's really a shame. It's just, I'm not really sure like how to. Well, I at some point, like I said, like, so I tend to overthink things, and like I think about things like generationally, like how does this impact, you know, as we keep going, you know, with our generations, and what does this lead to, and all of that. And then like I get really overwhelmed. I'm like, oh man, I'd better just focus on what can I look at, and I just focus on like, actually, I've got this beautiful child, and I've got an amazing family, and we just need to we need to do this right, you know, or as right as we can. And then the next generation, if Scarlett does choose to have children or whatever, but she will touch lives no matter what. Like we're always touching other people's lives and involved. And like that's the circle that I'm, I guess, responsible for. And then that will branch out, but I don't have to like change everybody, you know. I don't have to. What we're doing is enough, and it just needs to be authentic and real. My wife is like this, like what you touched on with getting older, and now like, oh, I can still learn just for me, like just because I want that, not to further my career necessarily or make more money or whatever, but my wife is like, she's always learning new like skills and techniques. And I mean, it's just incredible. And it's always just for her own gain. And sometimes she'll like get frustrated because she's like, well, I learned how to make, maybe it's like soap making. It's like, I learned how to make soap, but like, I haven't done that for a long time. It's like, yeah, but like you were so all in at that point. It was so cool. And that's okay too. Like you learn a skill and maybe you'll keep doing it forever, but it didn't take away from the fact that your brain was active and you're taking in information and then you're applying. Like this is the whole reason that we really should be learning advanced math, is because it's not necessarily doing math or doing algebra, but our brain is taking that information and it's learning how to think in a new way, in a different way. And that's what's really important about this stuff, and I just love that. Like, I just think that's so cool. And over the years, I know so many people have watched, especially I tend to do the same things over and over. I think I'm so much like Scarlet that I'm like, I'm just gonna go ride my bike, and I'll go do this touring thing. And I try to gain new experiences, and I'm always reading, but my wife's so much like the hands-on person. She's like, I'm going to learn how to landscape, and I'm just going to go out and build this thing. And it's what I'm going to learn how to do. And she's just all in, and people get so encouraged when they see that, here's this like lady and she's just absolutely killing it doing this thing. Like, and then they're like, well, why did you want to, like, are you going to try to make a business? She's like, I don't think so. I don't think I'm going to, but I'm really glad that I know how to do that, and I think it's amazing.
It was Carrie from K-Light who shared on this podcast, knowledge is light, and I recommend you carry as much as you can. Yeah, and I think that's just very prophetic and simple advice, and it can only do good things in your life,
Yeah.
Let's tie a bow on it, man. I could literally talk to you all day, but I'd love to figure out a way for us to connect and go ride bikes and do a little tour. And at a minimum, we should.
Like, you live like kind of. Are you right in the city? Or you like? I don't quite know.
I live in Bryan, Texas. There's about there's about 200,000 people in the surrounding areas. I looked up your town; it's like 1,400 people. So yeah, a lot more people here.
Yeah. We're way out there. No, that's. I mean, I would love it. I know Scarlett would love it. That'd be so much.
We'll text about it. My year is getting full, but maybe later on in the year we can figure out a way to do something. And it'd be cool to connect, see other parents and kids that are out there doing stuff, and maybe we can make a group ride and get a big group of people out there. Yeah.
I love it.
Right on, man. It was a pleasure. I appreciate the chat from both of y'all, and I particularly appreciate y'all's candor and willingness to share your experiences. I think that they're needed. I think we need those types of examples out there, and I appreciate you sharing yours.
Oh, thank you.
Well, till next time.
Yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity and for sharing the story, man. Really do appreciate it.
You'll hear it on the airwaves.
All right, cool.
All right, bye. Oh, bye, Scarlett.
Bye.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. It was an absolute pleasure to chat with Scarlett and her dad, Flint. As you can tell, they're both extremely charismatic. They've got years of experience to draw on, and they were a lot of fun to talk to. I am absolutely inspired. I'm actually staring at my tandem bike right now, and I'm going to be having my own 13-year-old daughter listen to this episode, and hopefully she gets inspired to go on some more epic bikepacking trips with dad. And if not, maybe I just take her. Maybe I just make her go. I don't know. We'll see. But again, thank you to Scarlett and Flint for coming on. Absolute pleasure, and I cannot wait to see what y'all do in the future. Don't forget to support the people that make this show possible. Today's episode was brought to us by Old Man Mountain Racks and Athletic Greens. And of course, if you would like to contribute to these episodes and help me produce them, you can find out more over at patreon.com/bikes or death. Until next week, you know what to do. Go ride your damn bike.
It was the middle of the night. You grabbed your knife and you held it tight. The sounds of beasts kept you awake. The sounds they made kept you afraid. into strength as you push further. Every pedal stroke, stronger and firmer. Your bike feels weightless, your legs aren't tired. You think to yourself, just a few more miles. Bikes, or death. Bikes,